Welcome back to Medscape from ADA 2024, where I'm Dr. Akshay Jain, endocrinologist from Vancouver, and I'm joined by Dr. James Kim, primary care physician from Calgary, Canada. And both Dr. Kim and I attended ADA 2024, and we sat down and went over all our learnings and decided there was a whole heap of clinical pearls that we learned from the conference, and we thought it would be awesome if we could share our learnings with all of you, both from a primary care lens as well as from an endocrinology perspective. One study that Dr. Kim and I learned about, and we think it has got some definite nuances in management of people living with diabetes, is data regarding inhaled insulin. Now, for the longest time, when we have patients in our clinic who have perhaps failed multiple oral agents or are having very high blood sugars, we obviously want to consider starting them on insulin for type 2 diabetes. And sometimes there is a significant barrier, which is related to the needles, right? So there's an actual term for this called trypanophobia. That's a fear of needles. And for the longest time, people have not wanted to take insulin or injectables because of the fact that it's only one way of administering it, which is subcutaneous. So enter now inhaled insulin. So we saw studies that were shown at the ADA 2024 conference that looked at a new inhaled insulin called Afrezza. And Afrezza essentially is a short-acting insulin. So it's kind of like a prandial insulin derivative, where it can be inhaled by an individual, and it will work for mealtime control of blood sugars. So first thing first, Dr. Kim, in your practice, how often do you see people not wanting to take shots, and has this been a big barrier for you in starting insulin?
No, first of all, thank you for having me. Yes, to answer your question, absolutely. I encounter this on a weekly basis, and I'm not even an endocrinologist. I just have an interest in diabetes, and there are a number of patients that I think will benefit massively with insulin, but they're just needle phobic. You taught me that word, but I can never pronounce it, so my apologies for not remembering that phobia. But I'm just going to call it needle phobia, because I'm a simple-minded person. The needle phobia is massive. And I think there's a definite fear of the needle, but there's also a fear of failure. So as soon as an injection is mentioned, a lot of patients feel that, you know what, I failed miserably. So there's a lot of emotional roller coaster that happens with it as well. And I'm sure, Dr. Jain, you have seen many patients, especially from Asia, who would say that, oh, my auntie got onto insulin, and 3 months later, she had got into kidney transplant. And my uncle had started on insulin, and he unfortunately passed away a couple of months later. And unfortunately, they're blaming a lot of those things on insulin. I also have a number of patients who said they were on insulin before many years ago, and they experienced some severe hypoglycemic events, and they don't want to get onto insulin ever again. Which is really unfortunate, because you know that if those patients, those aunties and uncles were on insulin long before, maybe we could have saved their legs and the kidneys and so on, and potentially death. And now we have advanced so much with insulin that hypoglycemia, yes, does occur, but a lot less than before. So we still have so much barriers when it comes to insulin initiations. Therefore, having this idea of inhaled insulin is fantastic. And I think we can get a lot more patients on insulin, the medication they actually need.
Yeah, absolutely. I think inhaled insulin, the studies that we have seen at ADA 2024, the key thing that I found very interesting in those studies was the fact that, first of all, the pharmacokinetics of the insulin, it's working very quickly, right? So it starts working within minutes of administering it. And the fact that it lasts in the body only for a shorter duration of time compared to other injectable short-acting insulin. So it lasts in the body. The active insulin time is roughly about 2 hours or so based on the studies. which in my mind opens up a whole world of possibilities, because it means that people can take another correctional insulin if the blood sugars are still high after taking their first inhaled dose. If the sugars are still high, you can take another dose subsequently without worrying about stacking of insulin. So a lot of us are familiar with this term, which is if you take two shots of short-acting insulin too close to each other, the insulin doses might add up, and then can be a big drop in the blood sugars. It's called stacking of insulin, and this can be potentially avoided. Similarly, if you take your dinner time inhaled insulin, and if the sugars are still high around bedtime, you could take a smaller dose of the inhaled insulin and not worry about a middle of the night hypoglycemia, because the effect of the insulin would be only for a little while. So that's one key learning that I found was very helpful. And the other important thing that I found was that this is not for everyone. So there are some restrictions. And essentially the contraindication is if there's people who have asthma or COPD, they cannot be prescribed an inhaled insulin. What are your thoughts, Dr. Kim, based on this from your practice in primary care?
It is very fascinating for sure. And I cannot wait to get hold of this insulin, actually. I can already think of some patients who may benefit a lot. So you've mentioned the asthma and COPD patients, and I think it makes more sense because there is an actual airway problem. I also wonder what will happen to patients who have restrictive airway disease, where asthma and COPD falls under obstructive airway disease. But what if they have obesity where it's really pressing into the diaphragm, and where they may not be able to take the deep breath in? How will they react? What about someone who's got cold, someone who has a lot of postnasal drips, or someone who tends to cough a lot? What about egg allergies and so on? So there are a lot of question marks around this insulin before obviously I initiate these medications, but a lot of excitement, but also a lot of question marks at the same time.
Yeah, I think these are very important practical considerations that we'll uncover as we start using more of this in clinical practice. The other important thing to note is the presenters told us that it's important to monitor pulmonary function tests. So it's important to get a baseline PFT or a pulmonary function test. And then we have to do another one in 6 months, followed by annually thereafter. If it at any point of time, the FEV1 drops by 20% or more, then that would be an indication for discontinuation of the inhaled insulin. Now, the pulmonary function test does not need to be one of those fancier ones. The study group would just do office spirometries. But I'm wondering, Dr. Kim, in primary care, do you think this could potentially be a rate-limiting factor?
In Alberta, so where I reside, no, because spirometry is very easily accessible in the province. For example, in Calgary alone, we have a population of about 1.3 million people. We have over 13 or 15 companies that can actually do this spirometry, and we can get these things done literally within a week or two. So in Alberta, no. However, I am aware that in other provinces in Canada, it can definitely be a huge rate limiting factor for sure. Not everyone has the office-based spirometry, definitely not within the primary care office. It has to be referred out to these private companies most likely. And some of the rural areas will have to rely on the provincial hospitals, where the access can be even more challenging. And on the day of the actual spirometry, if the person has a cough or not feeling well, it's going to be a problem because you don't want the spirometry to be infected with a whole bunch of viruses. So you'll have to cancel that, and it can be a bit of an issue. In Alberta, no. Rest of the country can be a problem for sure.
Good. And, a lot of our viewers are from the United States and other parts of the world, and spirometry is generally quite easily accessible in most places. I think as an endocrinologist, I must confess, it's been a long time since I've even ordered a spirometry or any form of pulmonary function test. So I guess once I start using the inhaled insulin, I'll need to start brushing up on my pulmonary function test knowledge. But I think these are exciting times. At least we've got something to offer to people that would have otherwise not taken any insulin at all. So there's certainly that hope that now there's a different way to administer this, and hopefully it can only get better from here on.
Totally, very exciting.
Good. Thanks for joining us again, Dr. Kim. This is Dr. Akshay Jain with Medscape from ADA 2024. And don't forget to check out our other videos on Medscape for more coverage of the conference.